So we're about to hear from one of our keynote sponsors, Prosple, who've been a great supporter of the AAGE over recent years. They're back again this year. And the session this morning, we have Grant and Sam from Prosple. They're going to be talking about finding exceptional talent in unexpected ways, how to use recruitment pathways to attract and retain better talent. And as always, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. So if there's anything interesting that catches your fancy during the presentation, submit a question via the Q&A button. I like it if the questions come in during the presentation, not at the end. And as always, you can upvote the questions. So if you see a question you like, you can upvote it towards the top of the list. So let's cross now to, hopefully, and I can get out of this and we can cross live. So over to Grant and Sam.
Thanks, Ben, and welcome everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to Prosple keynotes on reimagining diverse hiring. So first of all, before we kick things off, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I'd also like to extend kia ora koutou katoa to all my Kiwi friends over here. I'm actually dialing in from Auckland, New Zealand today. So a number of graduate recruiters and universities online today as well. So like I mentioned, my name's Grant. I'm the VP of Sales here at Prosple, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Sam McDonald, who's the Enterprise Partnerships Manager. For those who aren't familiar with Prosple and who we are and what we do, we're the team that actually powers Grad Australia. You might know Grad Australia, which is #1 or most highest traffic job board in Australia. And whilst our roots are local, we've actually expanded globally over the last couple of years. So we expanded out to Philippines, India, Malaysia, Singapore, amongst a few other countries. So all of which we're really proud to actually share that we're actually helping over 2 million students per year get the best possible start to their career. So how do we do all this? Just for a little bit of context, is via the Prosple ecosystem. So how that works is we connect employers, universities, and students together. So what that looks like in practice is that we encourage employers to publish authentic content by way of day in the life stories, virtual job previews, and other information to help basically encourage students to make more targeted applications and better career choices. This in turn helps the universities and the career centres there increase the employability of their students, and thus help students get the best possible start to their career and land their dream job. So I'd like to kick things off with a little poll. Who here has diversity targets? So I think I'm just going to throw to Ben to open up that poll, and it's top right-hand corner next to the Q&A chat. Who here has diversity targets? Give it 30 seconds or so for the votes to start flowing through. All right, we might give it another 20 seconds or so. This is the first time running one of these polls, so I'm not sure how. There we go. The results are in. So looks like we've got 76% of people who've got diversity targets within the organisation. So looks like many of you are in the right place. Good to see. So we'll just close off that poll in a moment. We're still moving around a little bit, about 70%. Fantastic. So what I didn't ask in that poll is how to actually recruit. It was how difficult it is, rather, to recruit diverse talent. And we know that it's extremely difficult because you told us this in a recent survey. So as part of the 2020 AAGE Graduate Employer Survey, and shout out to AAGE for running those surveys, really awesome data that we get every year. One of the questions that was asked to graduate recruiters is basically, what were the main challenges that you face when it comes to hiring grads? And 48% of grad recruiters found it really difficult to recruit diverse talent. So we know that's really, really difficult. But what if there was another way? What if there was another way to hit your diversity targets while increasing access to opportunity and, in the end, building a better future for all? So I'd like to hand over to Sam to actually talk about why diverse hiring is so difficult and delve into some of the stats and data on that front as well. So Sam, pass across to you.
Thanks, Grant. I'd also like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. But before we go any further, as Grant mentioned, it is first important to understand why recruiting diverse talent can be so difficult. So let's start first with how many of you there actually are. So incredibly, over the last 6 years, there's been a 36% increase in the number of full AAGE members. Now, this is fantastic for students. There's more employers who are recognizing the benefits of investing in their early talent. But it does mean competition is increasing. Not only are there more of you as well, but you're hiring more. Since 2018, there's been a 4% increase in the number of graduate jobs being advertised on the Prosple network alone. And just look at that jump this year. That light blue bar you can sort of see on the graph there indicates the number of roles posted this year, let alone compared to previous years as well. It's a stark increase. Not only are there's more of you and more of you are posting more roles, but increasingly you're looking to hire diverse teams, which is fantastic. But it does mean, as all these last three slides have shown, competition is getting fierce, particularly for our ideal talent. Speaking of our ideal talent, what does that actually look like? Well, firstly, we're actually producing fewer graduates. It is getting more and more difficult to recruit students in Australia. And in fact, over the last 5 years, pre-pandemic, the growth in student numbers came pretty much from international students. Since the pandemic as well, we've found that there's been a 15% decrease in the number of graduating students, and we anticipate probably another 7% drop next year, with probably a smaller graduate cohort for next 2 or so years as well. And this isn't just a trend that's been seen in Australia or just because of the pandemic, but globally, there has been a reduction in the number of students enrolling, particularly in the countries like the United States, who have seen a 7% drop in the number of enrolled students compared to their peak of 2010. And in fact, that 7% doesn't even account for the pandemic as well. I think it ends at 2019, so potentially even further. So overall, number of students are declining, but what does that look like for our ideal talent? So in terms of the 1.6 or so million university students in Australia, about 150,000 or so graduate each year from domestic students, typically for your bachelor degrees. Of that cohort, only 3,000 are Indigenous, for example. When we start looking at some of the key degrees that we're all looking for, say accounting, 13 students, IT, 39, 47 from engineering, 77 from law, the numbers get even more stark. And it's not just, so focus a bit on Indigenous there, but for other demographics, we might be looking at, say, female tech students. Typically, the trends aren't drastically improving. For example, this graph here showcases the ratio of the number of female to male students, domestic students in Australia studying tech degrees. You can sort of see it's actually gotten worse since 2001. Last few years, it's starting to improve slightly, but not significantly. Not to account for the fact that there are, in summary, more of you and less of them. But thanks, Grant. I'll throw it back to you. Talk about why we care about it.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So we thought it'd be good to maybe take a quick step back and recap why diverse hiring is important. So we want to look at it from a few different perspectives per se. So I want to run our next poll, and if I can throw across to the team, do you keep your tomato sauce or ketchup in the fridge or in the pantry? What about you, Sam?
Definitely a fridge person, I must say.
Yeah, me too. It's one of those ones like when you buy it, it goes straight into the pantry, and then when you open it, it's straight into the fridge. But don't want to coerce the audience. Hey?
About Ben before, I'm going to throw him under the bus, said he doesn't even have tomato sauce.
Yeah, and like I said, we couldn't unfortunately account to people who don't have taste buds. I think with my comments, I think that's a bit harsh. Sorry, Ben. All right, so we'll give it a few more seconds. So we can see 70%, 68. Keep tomato sauce in the fridge as opposed to the pantry, although pantry's creeping up a little bit. We were chatting about this before, actually, that if we ran this poll in the UK, for example, it's cold enough outside the fridge for it to actually not even matter. So we probably would have got a lopsided. So it depends on what hemisphere you're dialing in from as well. So it looks like it's balanced out around that 70%. Now, I promise you there's a point to this. So let's pretend for a moment that we work for a company that makes Worcestershire sauce. And let's say that you want to come up with a new Australian blend of sauce. So let's say you're a UK manufacturer, you've moved onto the Australian shores, and you want to create something that's really appropriate for the Australian market. Now, if everyone at your company kept their tomato sauce in the fridge, no one might ever think to actually associate it with Worcestershire sauce. But in fact, Worcestershire sauce and tomato sauce actually makes a fantastic combination. In fact, it's actually what makes sausage rolls taste so good. So the point I'm getting at here is that this is why diversity of thought is so important within an organization. If you have different people from different backgrounds who grew up with different things, you're going to have people with different perspectives, i.e. putting tomato sauce in the fridge or the pantry. And this, as a result, it gives you more creativity, which means that you're creating a better and more unique product. So, I mean, it's no secret that Australia is a very, very multicultural society. So we can see that, and that's from all different backgrounds and all walks of life, right? So we can see in this data set here that almost 1 in 3 or 29% of us were born overseas. 21% of us have at least one parent that was born overseas. 1 in 5 speak another language other than English at home. 28% of Aussies, of the 25 million Australians, live in rural areas. 3.3% of us are either Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. 3.2% identify from the LGBT community, and almost 1 in 5 of Australians have a disability, 17.7%. So the question is, if your organisation doesn't look like this, how can you expect them to come up with ideas that represent and appeal to a broader Australian population? And look, a lot of you will know that there's a lot of benefits that derive from having a diverse workforce, and we've stepped through a few here. So, for example, 85% of companies believe that diversity is crucial to increasing innovation. 83% of execs believe that diversity actually improves in terms of attracting and retaining a diverse workforce. A lot of you grad recruiters will know that. 79% of companies believe that diversity improves overall work culture. And last but not least, it's just good business. So businesses are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their industry mean if they have a diverse team. So I'd like to share a quick video that went viral a few years ago, and I think it really nicely highlights the systemic disadvantage that many Australians face. So I'm going to throw to the team to share that video.
We are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this, a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. I mean, it is a US video, as you can hear by the American college tutor, but again, I think it really highlights some of the challenges rather that people from all diverse backgrounds do face. And I think it really emphasizes why diverse hiring is so important. Like, it's not only about diversity of hiring, which leads to better businesses, better ideas, like we just stepped through, but it's also simply just the right thing to do. It genuinely improves the lives of many. So even though everyone in Australia has access to university, actual university enrolment has more to do with factors determined before you were born rather than even your own decisions. So we think that because everyone technically has access to a HECS debt, student loan, as long as you get the enter score that you need, you can go to the university that you'd like or get the degree that you'd like to study. And thankfully, there's none of this system in the US where, which means that you basically need to be privately financed in order to go to university. There's a lot of stories of mums and dads putting up double mortgages in the houses to send their kids off to college. So the point being, we think it's great here, but when we actually look at the data, it actually tells a very different story. And I will touch on that in a moment. But the analogy I quite like to make here is, do you follow your local sports team, for example, because you completed rigorous research in terms of all the teams in that competition and then decided to support your team? Or do you just support your team because that's who your mum or dad supported when you were growing up? I mean, I know, point in case here, I'm a Western Bulldogs supporter in the AFL, and I certainly didn't have a choice to go for the Bulldogs. My dad wouldn't have had any other way. So the point being is that just because you've got the freedom to choose something doesn't necessarily mean that you have the freedom of choice. There are many, many other factors that actually determine the path that you will take. And like I promised, we can see this in the data, some fascinating data here. So people are significantly less likely to go to university if they grow up in a remote area of Australia. So 17% of people from remote areas go to university. Now, if you compare that with people who grow up in urban areas, that number actually more than doubles at 39%. Does money matter? Of course it does. So people from high-income families are 3 times more likely to go to university. So students from in the low socioeconomic status category only make up 11% of the total domestic undergraduate students. Now you compare that with people who come from high income families, 34% of them end up obtaining a university qualification. What about your parents? We just touched on them. Do they have an influence on your career path and what track you go down? Again, of course they do. If your mum or dad went to university, you are more likely to want to go to university and follow in their footsteps. So 41% of those parents who didn't go to university want to go to uni. And now, whereas you compare that with 55% of people whose parents did go to university, also, as I said, want to follow in their footsteps and go to university. What about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders? It's, again, fascinating data here. You're 4 times more likely to go to university if you are a non-Indigenous Australian. So if you're a non-Indigenous Australian, 36% of the population obtain a university degree, whereas if you're an Indigenous Australian, you're in that 9% bracket. Now, it must be said that there's a lot of work. I know there's a lot of universities on this call right now, and they know that their local uni is doing a lot of work in this space to help bridge the gap. Very recently, the coalition committed over $1 billion, I think it was 2 months ago, $1 billion to reduce the disadvantage for Indigenous Australians. There's a lot of scholarships being introduced. And the good news is we can see it's working, right? So you can see the graph on the left-hand side of your screen, which shows over the last 13 years, there's been a 138% increase, so more than double the amount of Indigenous student enrolments. So we can see that there's progress, albeit a little bit slow. So what I find quite interesting is that when given the opportunity, disadvantaged students really thrive. So a recent study by the University Admission Centre, or UAC, showed that disadvantaged students actually perform better at university and studying in their qualification. Now, there's the hypothesis here, and there's I'm sure many, that there's a point to prove for these disadvantaged students, but it's interesting nonetheless. But the thing is it's not moving the needle quick enough to keep up with the graduate employers and everyone on call and your hiring needs. So like I shared earlier, 48% of employers do struggle to recruit diverse talent. So whilst the talent pool rather, it is growing, there's just simply not enough fish in the sea. So I'd like to hand back to Sam to share that big idea that we promised at the start and how you can hit those diversity targets. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Grant. Yeah, time for that sort of $1 million question, right? Like, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, yes, Sam and Grant, we know it's tough. We live it every day, right? Like, how do we get better? How do we improve? Before I launch into that, it's probably worth doing another quick poll. Last one, I promise. How many of you require a university degree for your graduate or intern programs? These polls are quite good. It gives me a chance to quick water break. Let's give another 20 or so seconds, I think, for everyone to put in their answer.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by what's to come out of this one.
Right. Wow, a pretty stark majority of you here, about 94%. It's actually roughly about the number Grant and I had sort of hypothesized before this, maybe that sort of 10 to 90%.
Yeah.
So awesome. So let's take a step back to this slide from earlier, if we can. which again, remind you that shows that of the 1.6 million university students in Australia, only 3,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples will graduate from a degree each year. Well, that slide didn't actually paint the full picture. Why are we limiting ourselves to just such a small percentage of the total talent pool for graduate programs? While this slide's very specific into just recruitment, it does ring true for many of our other areas of interest. Why do we limit ourselves to the 600 female tech undergrads who complete their degree each year? Or from students with disability? Why do we narrow our pool? We could be, for want of a better term, fishing from a wider, bigger pool. Is it because education is a key indicator of a person's job potential? Well, I'm not quite sure that the stats actually back that up. One study by the University of Iowa actually found that reviewing data from job performance over 100 years, that it found that a person's education only predicted their ability to perform on the job by 10%. It was defined actually in that study as unlikely to be useful as a predictor of job performance. Personally, that seemed crazy to me at first, like seeing that stat, particularly someone who went to, did a degree himself and would still potentially do some further study down the track as well. But it lines up directly with what you've all been saying for years. In fact, in one of the recent AAGE employer surveys, you all ranked university grades as the least important metric that you assess, with only 11% saying it was very important to your recruitment process. There's plenty of great examples of practical examples of people who have come and achieved a lot without a degree. From Paul Keating, who never got a degree, Prime Minister of Australia, and potentially had undiagnosed dyslexia as a child. Mia Freeman dropped out of university because she just wasn't enjoying it, ended up landing an internship at Clio and became the youngest ever editor of Cosmopolitan magazine at age 24. Finally, Peter Beck, as a child, he wanted to build rockets, left home at 17, took up a tool-making apprenticeship. While working in the apprenticeship, he used the company workshop to experiment with rockets. Never attended university, but this year, his company Rocket Lab, which now partners with NASA, is planning to land the first woman and person of color on the moon. So maybe hashtag no degree really could be your secret weapon to increase not only the diversity of your hires, but help you to attract real skill gaps as well. In fact, there's plenty of organizations, plenty of examples of organizations that are already beginning to live this. A really good example is MYOB. I think we called them out last year, but they're continuing to engage talent from outside of the degree. Next part, Grant. Oh, there we go. To a number of the big four, I think Xero even said that they don't just take university degrees anymore. Even Elon Musk, the world's richest man, has recently come out and said that a college degree isn't required for a job at Tesla. And he's not the only tech CEO making that change. And it's not just tech companies doing that too. Even from this week, I know BDO had mentioned to me something about a high school program that they're looking at. On one of the presentations yesterday, New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment said they were hiring TAFE students to increase accessibility for students with a disability. So there's plenty of tangible examples of this, and particularly outside of Australia too. We could look to the UK. It's been a thing for a few years now as well. We don't just have to look outside of university necessarily. So it's not about hey, uni's the only, look out, uni's not a great pathway for it. In fact, a lot of the universities more recently have been making some really great strides to open up access to students via non-traditional pathways of 4-year, 3-year degree. Micro-credentials, short courses are some really good examples. And we've even seen some employers leading that initiative with them as well. So it's not all about that. It's just rethink, it's a 3-year degree, really the only, or 4-year degree, or however long a degree takes, is that the only pathway that we should be taking? Now, take a step back for a second. We're very conscious. We talked a little bit about this last year. We quite often we'll pose questions and not a lot of answers. So we've been working a bit hard more recently at Prosple to try and help you with this journey to the hashtag no degree journey. So hopefully a few of you that will work with this are starting to get a little bit familiar with the Prosple Employer Portal, which is a new tool that we've developed so that you can just post your jobs natively into our wider network rather than having to go through all the different sort of stages. So when you post your job now, go to the next slide, Grant, you'll notice there's a tab there in regards to hiring criteria. In that part, you'll see there's a little component that says add pathway. And when you click that button there, you'll get the option to specify entry points into your programs. So you might still say, I assume most of you will still say, yep, major component of starting our grad program is a bachelor degree. So for example, I did a bit of a mock technology graduate program, and the entry pathway via university is to have a bachelor degree in technology. And it's anything related to tech, right? Computer science, etc. Pretty standard, exactly how you'd probably be doing it right now. But maybe you'll recognize that, hey, look, that's a great way to have talent coming in, but that's not the only way you can enter our grad program. Maybe we'll say that there's a non-university entry pathway. And that could be made up of a whole different things. Maybe it's the student's done a micro-credential, for example, at General Assembly on software engineering, like a 12-week little course. You might not weight that 100% equal to a 4-year degree. So you might say, look, if you've done that pathway, a micro-credential, you also need maybe 12 months work experience, any role, just to show commercial awareness. And you need to be able to demonstrate a passion for technology. But the combination here can be endless. It's up to you how you weight this and how you sort of do this component. What that'll look like then, you'll sort of see on the slide here in the job opportunity page, there's these 2 pathways. And then when it's live on the platform, on the network, you can sort of see, this role doesn't have much content there, but you can sort of see in the right-hand corner there, there's these 2 options of how you enter. And if we jump to the next slide, the student can, as they look into it, be like, oh, cool, option A, yeah, university degree. Maybe I'm already at uni, that's fantastic. Maybe for other students who, a degree is not the pathway they want to take for whatever reason, there's an opportunity for them to still become a part of your organization, become a part of your graduate program as well. Because we know there's a lot of benefits, a lot of potential for students coming through those programs. To help get those roles out there, this breadth of roles as well, we're at Prosple looking to expand where your role will reach. As many of you will know, we work quite closely with a number of our universities across Australia, and our platform at Grant Australia is very, very much geared towards uni students, of course. But we've been making some strides in recent months even to really expand the reach of where your roles, but also the students that we're assisting. It's partnering with some universities, continue to partner with a number of our leading associations like Engineers Australia, the Chartered Accountants, partnering with groups like your GradWise, really big on helping to bridge the disability gap in employment, and in Digitech, really big on partnering, helping more Indigenous students enter the tech space. So there's lots of that. It's not all just about Prosple though. I will obviously mention like where else can you begin outside of us? And get in touch with your local TAFEs. See if there's maybe diplomas or courses that they do that might be relevant to you. Maybe start looking at high schools as well. Is a degree, is it necessary? Maybe you offer a program where students come straight in after high school and learn the skills straight from yourself. Maybe it's about finding some independent educators who do more short courses, or even, again, going back to the university point, looking more closely with universities, what micro-credentials and short courses they have on offer. Maybe you'll even, like some in the tech, particularly in the United States, are doing, develop your own courses that you'll put on some of these platforms to train the skills directly before they even start. So there's lots there. I think that we just want to end finally, before we get into questions, on this slide here. Bit of a nice quote for us all to feel good about what we're doing here. Because at Prosple, we don't have all the answers, and we can't do this on our own. Together, we can make a difference. And by all means, share this with anyone that you know that cares about diversity hiring. It could be your boss, your colleague, someone else within the industry. You all know someone. And if we can all succeed in hiring more diverse graduates, we can make the world a better and more equitable place.